Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Let's Process That podcast with Emily and Nick. I'm Emily Christopher.
And I'm Nick Connercamp.
And we are so glad that you have joined us once again. Thank you to all of you who are listening, who have subscribed, liked, followed us on social media, all the things. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Before we start this one, I meant to do this on the others as well, but I forgot because, well, I'm easily distracted. But I want us to share something that we're really enjoying right now. And it can literally be anything from a book to a TV show to a food to an activity, whatever it is. So Nick, I'll let you go first and you can share what you're really enjoying right now.
Great. Well, this last week at my job, we hosted 300 volunteers from the Home Depot Foundation to come to our homeless shelter and put in a new professional playground, landscaping, stuff like that. It takes a lot of work to get ready for 300 volunteers in one day. And on Monday, my coworker said, "Hey, do you know how to drive a skid steer?" And I said, "A skid steer? I don't even know what that is." And he said, "Well, basically it's a forklift with like tank tracks on it." And I'm like, "Oh no, you don't want me doing that. I don't know how to drive anything near like that. Plus, this is a very big, I didn't want to destroy a bunch of stuff. It's dangerous, all that stuff." He talked me into just driving around the parking lot, figuring out how to do it. So while I'm driving around the parking lot, some construction guys see me and they holler for me to come over and move a pallet for them. And I've never done this, no idea. So I'm using the gears, the foot pedals. And really, it's a pretty simple thing once you get used to it. So this last week, I moved about 100 pallets, driving around, manual labor, blue collar, driving a forklift, moving stuff. And so that's what I'm enjoying now, tapping into my inner blue collar worker guy. It's been a long time.
That is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, mine could not be any more different. I'm going to share two of my favorite snack right now.
Oh.
Because if you know me, if you're really close to me, if you're one of my friends, I hyperfixate on foods, which I've had the same hyperfixation on my breakfast for the last probably over 2 years now, which is this like spinach omelet that I make, but it's very specific. You can follow my YouTube channel. I think I actually have a video on what I do. But my favorite snack. Yeah. But right now, like my favorite summer snack is a kombucha and dried organic mango. So my friend Susie, she was like, "You need to be eating fermented foods or beverages every day." So I was like, "Oh, wine." She's like, "No." But like yogurts, kimchi, sauerkraut, all that kind of stuff. And so I've always liked kombucha, but I'm having one all the time. And someone that you and I both know, I think he still drinks his kombucha every day. That's Dan Frost.
Mm-hmm.
And Dan's always looking good. So I'm like,
Sure.
Okay, if it works for Dan and my friend Susie, then it must be good. So I love kombucha. But Costco has this organic dried mango and it is a delight. It's so good because you're like, "Oh, I'm eating fruit," and it doesn't have added sugar. So I'm like, okay, this is great.
I love
so
it.
Anyways.
So what's funny is I've never heard of fermented sauerkraut before, but we stockpiled some food in 2020. And so now it's time to eat some of that stuff. So I pulled out the fermented sauerkraut last week and tried it and was not a fan at all. But I have at least tried it, so we have some connection there.
There we go. Everything's full circle.
Yeah.
Well, very good. Well, I'm glad we shared our favorite things. And that just makes me want to remind everybody, like, it's always nice to pause in the chaos and be like, what is something I'm liking? Because it will change from week to week, day to day, month to month, year to year. But like noticing things that you actually like, I think is very important because we get in like just this rat race of life. And it's like, oh, what was I enjoying? Like what brought me genuine joy? And it could be anything from driving a forklift to having a little bit of mango.
I love it. And, the subject we're going to talk about today is a little heavy. And so it's nice just to sprinkle in there some joyful, happy, kind little things here and there, right?
Of course. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to you, Nick, for you to start us off. This is kind of like a part 2 to our Necessary Endings episode. So if you haven't watched that, please go back and watch it. That way everything will just flow really nice. But if you've not, it's not a requirement that you see that one, but it's definitely going to be playing off of that. So Nick, I'm passing it to you.
And just for our new listeners, we don't require our listeners to do anything. So we'll just start with that. So,
or do we? We're like, follow us on social media. No, we don't require you anything.
So, you know how reticular activity works. You buy a yellow Volkswagen and then you notice yellow Volkswagens everywhere. So here you and I go and have a conversation about necessary endings, new seasons of our life, new relationships, divorce. And, we open that can of worms, and next thing you know, our brain says, oh, you're interested in that? Well, let's just look around and see what kind of information I can bring in. So just this week, I had several fascinating conversations. And I'm going to start with one, and then let's process that. And then I'll probably add some more of the conversation as we move along. But the thing that really caught my attention is I met a woman, middle-aged woman, who is recently divorced. And we were talking about how weird that is, how awkward that is. And she said that her and her husband were part of a small group at their local church for married couples. And then they got separated, and then they got divorced. And she kept going to the small group. And then finally, the small group leader came to her and asked her if she would find a different small group because she didn't really fit the definition of this small group. And she ended up leaving that small group, not finding another small group, and actually leaving that church. And so, that just broke my heart. I was just thinking about it from Jesus's perspective that, here's a woman who didn't just come on Sunday morning and sit in the pew and listen to the sermon and leave. She did what we encourage people to do, get in community, build some friends. We all need each other. She does that. She goes through a bump in the road, a traumatic experience, a hard time in her life. Praise the Lord. She's perfectly positioned with healthy people around her to care for her and help her walk this out. Mm-hmm. And they accidentally or intentionally kick her out of the group. And it just breaks my heart because she had done all the right things to be able to benefit from this support system. But because she no longer fit the definition, she was asked to find another group. But where she had relationship was right there in that group. And when I heard that story, not that would not have happened under my leadership, because it very possibly would have. But now sitting on this side of the pastor, I'm just like, gosh, why don't we just throw the definition away? And it's almost like you have this vulnerable sheep who's part of the pack, where she needs to be, protected by the pack, the force of the pack. And then the pack says, hey, we need you to sort of go somewhere else for the vulnerable sheep. Mm-hmm. And it just broke my heart. And it made me think about, let's process that. Let's talk about that a little bit. And I have a family member who is going through a divorce right now. And it's like they go through this divorce. All their friends now have to vote on whether they are going to be friends with the husband or friends with the wife. And, it's all of this voting. It's almost like people have a relationship with the couple. And when the couple ceases to exist, then the relationships with the people within the couple also take a hit. And it's just this fascinating thing that now to have divorce happening in my family, which is not pretty prevalent, and watching the nuances of what my family members walking through with church and with friends, it's just fascinating to me. And I just want to process that a little bit and talk about what that feels like. And I know, Emily, that your own journey is unique and not like anyone else's, but you know something about this, Lane. I'm experiencing it with a loved one, but I never experienced it directly. Talk to me about anything that just provoked your curiosity in those two stories.
Unfortunately, I've seen that and somewhat lived it. So when I was married, we kind of had two separate lives. I tried to mesh a little bit more. Yeah. But there was rarely, I don't know, we didn't have a consistent friend circle. Like I had my friends and he had his friends.
Right.
And then I would try to force overlap. And it happened every once in a while. But when we were separated, he just really isolated himself. And I leaned into community. And of course, that has a lot to do with coping styles and how we were raised and that kind of thing. So it wasn't, I didn't experience this where people were having to choose. And I've definitely been a part of that. I know when I've had friends break up and it was a friend group and everybody was friends, and then you're having to pick sides.
Yep, totally.
I've definitely been a part of that, which is always messy and so uncomfortable and so hard to navigate because it really is a case-by-case basis on how all that works out. And did somebody do something terrible and, break the trust of someone or, whatever it may be with that. But from a personal standpoint, I don't feel like I put people in that position because when we separated, it was very much everything about us, our whole worlds were already very much on the fritz.
Yeah.
So when it officially happened, it was just automatically polarized.
Mm-hmm.
And there were some people that we were in counsel with. There was a couple of couples that we would meet with, and because right up to the end, I was fighting tooth and nail, because I was shamed into fighting for it.
Oh, this is interesting.
I was exhausted and didn't feel like fighting anymore, but because of my religious background, there was a lot of shame and guilt on me to do everything in my power to try to make it, even though I had been over it for a very long time. Now that is where it became very gray. And because those people that were kind of family to us, they were put in an awkward position because they loved both of us.
Sure.
And so when it happened, I really leaned into them and he really pulled away.
Mm.
And so yeah, there wasn't a lot of that for me personally, but like I said, I've definitely seen that where there's been drama with people having to pick sides. But I think just from your story, when I hear that people decided to keep an infrastructure of a small group and a title or a category, they wanted to hold tighter to that than somebody who's in pain, no matter what. However you end something, it's still an end. And so there's still a level of grief, whether this is something you really wanted and your life's going to be so much better for it, or you absolutely hate this and it's the most pain that you've ever been through, all this stuff. So the fact that we would choose that over looking at a person and being what do you need right now? Is it this community? How can we love you? How can we support you? Just it blows my mind that we are constantly picking systems over people.
Yeah. And you said two things that are really interesting to me. One was the shame piece. We'll get back to that. And then also, maybe going through this divorce, your life is going to be so much better. I want to talk about that because I've seen a lot in those two lanes. But a woman told me recently, she said, my parents didn't talk to me for 2 to 3 years after I got divorced.
Mm.
They felt like I was being selfish, putting my own happiness above everything else. What about the children? What about our Christian values that we don't get divorced under any circumstances? And they were like, it was a soul-sucking marriage. My soul was being broken off piece by piece. I was absolutely miserable. And I make this life choice. And then my parents don't talk to me for 2 or 3 years because of their belief system or their reputation. And that's got to be gut-wrenching when not just a church sort of kicks you out of a small group, but your family, and you know what it's like, and you know the belief systems you and I come from, and they're going to say you do everything you possibly can to make the marriage work. Did that belief system, not the people, because I know most of the people you're talking about, and they're good people, they love you and all that. And maybe they're, especially a parent who's been through 30, 40 years of marriage, will look at a child who's been through a couple years of marriage and honey, there are hard seasons we have to get through. And I get that. Totally do. They might be speaking from experience, not fully understanding the amount of pain that you're in. But where do you feel like some of that shame comes from? Is it a belief system? Is it reputation? Is it just feeling like you're making a mistake because you're young and reckless and you don't know any better, young lady? Stop it.
Yes. And it's so funny. My camera just fell. So y'all are getting a little behind the scenes of
We're
what
working
happened.
out the kinks.
Let me fix this camera. Well, let me say this. So when I was in my marriage, let's hope that fits. Y'all are seeing it all, baby. This is live. No, it's not live. I'm kidding. Is it going to stay? Okay, great. So let me say this. In my marriage, I kept a lot of things hidden. I think I mentioned this I did. I mentioned that I kept a lot of things hidden. I didn't share a lot because I was so embarrassed and I don't like failing, and my marriage was failing miserably. And so even my parents, they knew some, but they didn't know everything. So when I was expressing these feelings of like, I hate this, I don't love him, this is just not it. Like, I know this is not God's best for me. They were telling me, of course, like, you got to fight for your marriage. So when I decided to leave, I had to sit both of my parents down. Like, I scheduled time and I was like, I need to tell you everything. And this is going to be so painful. It's going to be painful for me. It's going to be painful for you, but I need you to know. And until I was totally honest with everything that was happening, they were, of course, saying these things because, again, I feel like a lot of people in my generation do sometimes give up quickly. Like, nobody likes pain, and not many people like hard work. And so, I totally understand the theological, biblical, societal things that were coming against me. So until I was very honest, those things were what I was up against. And once my parents, of course, heard everything, they were great. And they were like, okay, like, this is going to be hard, but we love you and we support you. Now the other places, when I was meeting with a couple of, we were doing like couples counseling.
Right.
They were very much like, gotta keep fighting, and and again, I love these people and I appreciate their insight. But you don't know what it's like to be in somebody else's shoes.
Sure.
And, it's just hard to keep pushing that when you don't know how bad it is.
Okay, so let's talk about that phenomenon, because I know most of the people you're talking about, we love, we respect them, and they're always going to encourage towards the highest moral values because that's who they are. But the problem is they're speaking from their reality and the reality you projected. So what is it about? I mean, I've seen it numerous times. We're like, oh my gosh, what happened? We thought they were so happy. We thought they were a wonderful couple. What is it? What is it in a failing relationship that we're not honest and truthful with our own parents, some of our mentors and best friends, that when it does come out, it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know all this was happening. They're preaching from a reality you project. So
Absolutely.
why do we even feel the need to do that when things are failing?
Because it goes all back to shame and embarrassment. Like, I had a fairy tale, and now the fairy tale was up in flames. Like,
wow, you had it because you had a fairy tale beginning.
Yes,
and that
absolutely.
itself would put extra pressure on it.
Oh gosh, yeah. And then we even had people like writing news articles about us. Like, we had a lady who worked for Hallmark reach out to me.
Wow.
I mean, that kind of pressure is unreal. And then you throw in, you're in your early 20s. I had walked through
What do you know?
I know nothing.
Yeah,
I had walked through cancer, all this stuff. And yeah, you're just grasping at whatever can be there. And so, yeah, it's really hard and embarrassing when this dream and this story and this ideology you've like put up in front of everybody, and it's actually burning or rotting. It's awful. It's painful.
So go back for a second. I was going to take us in a different direction, but some of the things you're saying are just so fascinating. How much do you think the cancer had to do with you saying enough? I mean, when you're dealing with life and death situations, your day-to-day has to be highlighted, amplified, because you had walked through some serious things. How much do you think that impacted your decision that says no more?
Greatly. Because when you are young and you're sick, and you've had to do multiple surgeries, multiple treatments, just all this stuff, you really understand how short life is and how fragile life is. And I mean, when I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer, I was 23 and I was in the best shape of my life and I was just unstoppable. And then all of a sudden, like, here's this thing that literally just sits you on your butt, and you're humbled real quick, and your outlook on the world is totally different. Just, it changes everything. And so I had tolerated what I could tolerate, with every hope and every effort to make it work. And the thing that I experienced, a lot of people, they're like, this is just awful all the time. Mine was highs and lows, highs and lows, highs and lows. Like it was like whiplash all the time. And so I was just exhausted. And so that was where that came in, where I was just like, I can't do this anymore.
Fascinating. So you, do you regret your divorce?
No.
I remember a counselor that you and I know who said when somebody ever comes in and says, I'm walking through a divorce, he says, well, how do you feel about that? He says, some people are like, I'm miserable. And other people are like, best thing ever happened to me, which is fascinating because almost every time I see a divorce, you watch one person thrive right after it and the other person is in the tank, and you can see who was carrying that relationship. You can see who was propping it up, keeping it going, and then they separate and one just goes, and the other one's like, I can't believe this. I had a single woman say to me one time, I cannot believe how much money I have. She says, how do I have more money under one income, mine, than on two incomes? She says, do you know how much that joker was spending? And so she was like, I had no idea. Why did I do this all these years and stuff like that? And so I just say that to say that you were just talking about the highs and the lows, and that's a lot to do with his personality. Yeah. And so no one really knows what's going on behind the scenes because you were providing the shock absorbers that kept it looking pretty solid.
For sure. And before we move on, I want to say this. My ex-husband and I have not spoken in almost 2 years. And once we separated, our only conversations were logistics for the most part. And I want to honor him and respect him. Absolutely. And I want to say that he is also much better divorced from me.
Okay, fair enough.
Or at least from what I know. And like I said, we don't speak, but I know like his life has changed. He has made some better decisions, and I'm happy for him. Like, I'm genuinely happy for him and wish him all the best. And that has taken me a lot of therapy and a lot of work. But when I hear, and it's funny, I only have one friend who ever like tells me, she's like, did you see this? And I'm like, girl, we have blocked each other on all things. When we got when we were done, we were both done, and that was it. But she'll like to say, oh, this is happening, right? And I'm like, that when I hear those things, I'm genuinely happy for him. Which again, 2 years ago, I'd been like, I don't care, Yeah. But I think it did take our divorce and for him to know that he can lose things, for him to now appreciate what he does have. Yeah. And it is interesting what process that all has to look like for the individual on both sides. Where you do have to pay the consequences for your actions. And my dad this is such a father leadership thing, but my dad used to always tell us growing up, he said, minimize your consequences. Because you will have consequences, positive or negative, but like, let's minimize negative consequences. And so the reality is that when decisions have been made in relationships, good, bad, whatever, the consequences are there. And so it's going to take you longer to rebuild or move forward from a consequence. Now, yeah, go ahead.
No, I appreciate that, but I also would say to you that I really respect the fact that you sound like you've forgiven him, the fact that you're even wanting him to do well. Hopefully he's forgiven you. I seen him not too long ago at the gym, and he was in a good place, doing much better than I had seen in a long time. We had a great conversation. And so I'm hoping that, I appreciate you not wanting to demonize him. And I also, I'm really trying to be, in this season of my life, treating people uniquely. And some people have come out of some horrible, horrible stuff and have not had the grace to forgive their ex at this point. And I don't want them to feel bad by hearing your story, but I'm grateful that you were able to unpack that and it's not impacting your life anymore. And the fact that he's moved on and he seems to make some better choices and doing well as well. So I think that's a positive.
Yeah. And the thing about that is I met my boyfriend shortly after my divorce. And I was already in therapy doing the work that I needed to. And right away, I was like, I don't want to take this stuff into this relationship.
Absolutely.
So I either deal with this now, like if I see Adrian as a person that I want to be with, a person of value that I care about, and I want to make this healthy and work, then I'm going to have to do the necessary stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's why I just dived headfirst into, and healing is a very long process. It's
Absolutely.
never like I'm still healing, and I probably will be my whole life. But I needed to take care of that stuff so that Adrian, wasn't paying the consequences for me not dealing with my junk.
And I appreciate that. Guys are sometimes very hesitant about getting counseling. And the problem is if you don't deal with your past, you bring it into your present relationship. And so many of your present decisions are made by a hurt or something that's happened in our past. And so I think that therapy is part of any kind of unpacking so that you don't project on Adrian things and behaviors that used to happen with your ex-husband. And so I applaud you for that. I want to bring up two other circumstances and get your take on them and see if any of this happened with you. You and I have a mutual friend that went through a divorce, and she made this comment. She says, I don't get invited out to dinner with couples anymore. I'm too big of a threat to their marriage. I used to be invited when I was married in a horrible relationship, but now that I'm single, I'm on the prey. I'm looking to take down some man somewhere, and so now all the couples are running for the hills because a new divorced woman's in their presence. And she says, I lost all my married friends. And then my family member that's going through a divorce immediately started filling the void with new friends. And what she said to me was loneliness. All of a sudden you don't have the kids for a week. And now it's just you in a house by yourself. And you're like, let's all go do something tonight. And so all the friends start coming out and making new friends because a lot of your old friends are gone. So now you have to make new friends. And now she's finding that she's not just adding a group of new friends, but a couple of great friends. And those great friends are replacing that group of new friends, even to the, some people feeling left out, that they're not, at the table anymore and all that. And I just thought that might be a natural part of the process, is that as you lose old friends because they have to vote or they don't know what to do with you, or suddenly you're a single woman and can't handle yourself around a married man, then you add a whole bunch of new friends. And sure, over time, as you evolve, as you grow, as you change, some of those friends are going to become great friends. And some of those friends were just buddies and acquaintances to have something to do to push back the loneliness. Can you speak to any of that personally?
Yeah. First off, I find that that's mostly a Christian circles kind of thing.
Interesting. Okay.
Where we're like indoctrinated to be like, once you're married, you can only hang out with married people. And I have a friend who right now she's in her late 30s. She's single. She would love to be married and have children, but it's just not been there for her yet. And she said, at church, I am totally like ostracized because I'm in this age demographic where I should be with the married couples, but they won't let me hang out with them because I'm not married. And I'm just like, that is so icky. And so I definitely see that more in the church world versus like, I don't know, Adrian and I have a friend, he's single and we always like joke, he's like our third wheel. But like Adrian's not threatened by him. I'm not attracted to him. You know, it's just like very obvious things that like people in church circles would be like, okay, I know you're not coming after my husband. But we put up these like really crazy like rules and regulations in the church world. And so I definitely have seen that. And I'm really, really thankful for the friends that I had when I was single, who were married. Like nobody made me feel that way, like I wasn't uninvited or whatever. And I think that's probably because I'm not friends with people who would do that anyways. And I'm somebody who just doesn't hang out to hang out. Yeah. I'm like a deeply loyal, deeply fierce friend that like, I don't know. I can do the small talk and like, but like, if I'm going to give my time to you, you mean something to me. And we know each other on that level, but I can definitely see that happening. And I'm sure it takes place all the time, depending on what circle you're running in.
So I think the revelation for me in all this, I think there's two takeaways that, again, not to draw a box around and put in concrete.
We're having a moment.
I'm not having a moment. You're having a moment. I just happen to be in your boat.
Hello, everyone. I know. I'm so sorry. All right, let's try this again. I don't know. This is why Adrian was like, you can do this on your own. So for those of you who don't know, my boyfriend's our producer and sound engineer, and he like walks Nick and I through step by step on what to do, like pressing different recording buttons on stuff. And he was like, okay, you've got it this time. And I was like, yeah, I got it. No worries. And my camera's fallen twice. So
you need him. He's good for us.
So as painful as I hate admitting that I need someone, but I need him for this.
Well, don't you mess up our producer.
No, don't worry.
Hold us together. All right, so what I was saying was two things that I don't want to put in concrete. I just want to point out that I think that this conversation has helped me with. Number one is that sometimes we build relationships with a couple, not with people individually. And when the couple doesn't survive, neither does our friendship with the people within that couple. And I've seen it too many times, and it is difficult when you cared about both people, and now are you going to be friends with them or the other, or are you taking sides and not taking sides? And it can be really difficult if you're a couple within a relationship with another couple and the other couple doesn't make it. It's hard to hold those relationships. And I think that the second thing, I just forgot the second thing. What was the brilliant thing that you just said a minute ago? I'll think of it in a second.
Okay. I distracted you with my camera dropping.
I'm very linear. I had my list put together.
I know.
And then suddenly there that goes. I'll think of it in just a second.
Cool. I know one thing that I was saying, I don't know if this is anything, but how we pick what circles we're in. I know a lot of people who hang out with couples just because they're in a couple. And you're like, somebody will be like, I hate my friend's girlfriend, or like, I hate my friend's husband or whatever. And like, but you keep going on vacations with them or you keep going to dinner. And I'm just like, is that not exhausting? Like, I know like you're probably not gonna be besties with everybody. And I'm really thankful our group of friends here, like we all actually enjoy each other. Like nobody's like, oh, so-and-so's boyfriend or so-and-so's fiance or husband or girl, thankfully. But I find that a lot of times, again, in Christian circles, because we don't hang out with people unless they're Christians, married, fit in our socioeconomic status. It's like, I see a lot of people who,
vote like us.
Yeah. So, when you have those parameters, you're probably going to get some people you actually don't even enjoy spending time with, but thank God they match your checklist.
Yeah, and that's the sad thing, and I know that I have friends that I have to have a certain level of relationship with their spouse in order to be able to be friends with them.
Mm.
You see what I'm saying? And
Mm-hmm.
so you and I understand the weight of the expectations in the church world. They're
Mm-hmm.
pretty, they're pretty intense. And so there's something about being post ministry, post pastorate that you and I both. I was asked to be in somebody's church government the other day. I'm like, no, I'm never going back there again, ever. And it's just so much that you carry. I guess one of the things that I take away is not just that we have relationship with the couple and the couple breaks. Sometimes we lose relationship with people, but also the shame piece that you talked about, that there are religious belief systems, there are expectations, there are reputations,
Mm-hmm.
there are projected realities that people are gauging with that aren't even real. And until you say, this is what's really going on,
Mm-hmm.
can they even understand and be able to relate to you? And so I think that that's a real takeaway for me is don't judge their reality by what I can see. It may
Mm-hmm.
not be real, and be more empathetic and more compassionate.
Yeah. And getting into those beyond surface level relationships, because I know there's plenty of people like they'll have dinner once a week with a group of people, but like they don't actually know each other. So
Yeah.
when something like divorce happens or, you know, someone does something off the wall, they're like completely shocked. I'm like, well, you didn't really know them. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we kept thinking, and not to say that there is not a time and place for like surfacey, cordial
Yeah.
acquaintance. There definitely is. Um, you can't be like deep besties with everybody. But if you are saying that you're going to do life with people, we also have to make space for people to be able to be very vulnerable and honest, and then not be shocked when they're like, I need to tell you what's happening. And then they're honest with you, and they do the Christian community thing and open their hearts up and let you in. And then you say, oh, I'm so sorry. But you can't come on Thursday evenings anymore.
Okay, so let me ask you this question, and I'm not talking about anybody specific, because there are people in this camp I love very much, and I'm not pointing out anybody in this camp.
Hmm.
But the focus on the family kind of group where, high values, high value on staying married no matter what. Okay, so when a friend from that group doesn't make it, isn't there a distancing that happens sometimes? Isn't there sometimes a little bit of I don't know any other way to say it than distancing from that utopian reality, that hope. And I mean, I don't know anybody in our circle that once they get married don't want it to be Disney. They don't want it. I mean, everybody I know wants it to be this wonderful, colorful, animated bird singing in the air, and it's wonderful for the rest of our lives. But when it doesn't work, it seems like sometimes that the focus on the family crowd is the hardest people to stay in relationship with because of their high values and expectations. Would you respond to that?
Yes, I would love to. My biggest thought on that as you're speaking is that has everything to do with control. We
Interesting.
want the utopia. We want the butterfly and sunshine and
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And so when something makes a minute threat to that, we want it away. When something is messy, people who want this cookie cutter life and like everything to be perfect all the time, when there's something that threatens that, they
Mm-hmm.
will boot it. And I've seen it happen before where if something gets hard, they're like, ooh, you're about to threaten my dystopia. Like
Yeah.
this like beautiful little, or not dystopia, my utopian ideologies, all this stuff that I have put into this beautiful bubble, and you will not mess it up.
Yeah. And again, I've got nothing against focus on the family or those values or those hopes and those dreams, and I'm definitely not projecting anything towards a person. I'm simply thinking that that the ideology seems the hardest
Mm-hmm.
to walk through sloppy stuff,
Right.
gray stuff. That they really they want a black and white world, and when
Mm-hmm.
gray comes into the picture, it's hard. And like what you just said, you just gave a pretty good description. I'm sure that's not fair for every one of them, but for a lot, I've seen that sometimes the Christian world is the hardest place to be empathetic, and it's folks that aren't carrying all those focus on the family expectations that sometimes are the most caring and kind during divorce.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And like I said, it all goes back to control. A lot of times, because people fight so fiercely to have this perfect life and to have the white picket fence. And I'm not coming in here to say like, oh, you shouldn't want that, because everybody wants a beautiful life.
Sure.
But life is very messy.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like when we're not allowed to have failures or process through junk and be honest about it, when it does happen, not if, when it does happen, then people with this outlook and like who hold firm to these things, it wrecks them. Like they have a way harder time because, again, you're coming in and messing up Disney World, and how dare you do that? And so that's why if something comes in, some of these people, I have a friend like, man, if you wreck her plans, adios.
Well, and I appreciate that. And again, we're just trying, we don't have it all figured out. We're trying to take a very messy, complicated subject of divorce and look at it. You and I can't help but come from a church world perspective because that's what we grew up in. And so trying to just, I guess I have no desire to burn anything down, make any judgments. I really want to know how to support people in their hardest time. I've boiled my faith down to two statements. God is love. Relationship is the operating system of the kingdom. And if that is true, then relationship has to matter beyond circumstances.
Yeah.
And so that's all I'm trying to say is that I want us to, I'd love to see, particularly the church world, but all of us, walk with people through messy relationships. And remember, this conversation started. A woman was asked to leave a small group because it was for married people when she was no longer married. And I just think we missed it. I just think that if we could have just pulled her in closer and said, we are your family. We're going to help you over the next year or two. We're going to help you figure this out. We're going to be there. We're going to help watch your kids. I think that the church would have done so much better if they kept her in the wrong small group because she had relationship there. And why do we need to kick her out? And I'm just trying to push us to do a little bit more empathetic care.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it is sometimes hard too, coming from a religious background that likes the black and white. And so when things like this happen, it's like, we didn't put that in the policy and procedure. It's like people matter more than your policy and procedure.
Oh, yeah. You and I both know all the sticky points where we got to have a policy and procedure to keep it black and white. And now I don't represent a statement of faith that's black and white. So I function in a lot more gray. I have one son that's pretty black and white. I have another son that loves the gray. Every circumstance is a little bit different. And so anyway, and then we get to absolute truths. And then at some point, I'm sure we're going to get to some of that as well. But I just wanted to unpack this a little bit because I know there's some hurting people going through hard circumstances. Unfortunately, when you lose that one relationship, many times you lose many relationships. And it becomes a very traumatic, hard time in our lives. And, I'm trying not to have to vote when I see a couple split up. I want to remain friends with both. I want to figure out how to support both in their hard times. So thank you for taking some time and let me take the lead on this one and just talk about your personal story. You're very vulnerable, and I appreciate your balance. And your healing really showed today, hearing you talk a little bit about where you've come to, where you want him to do well, and that you do not want to demonize him. And that there's lots of narrative and backstory.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thanks for providing a safe space. And I appreciate all of you for tuning in. Thank you for being gracious as my camera fell twice. But we're out here just doing our best, We're learning, we're growing. I can't wait to look back and just be like, remember when we had our little studios and we were having to learn Audacity and all the things. So It'll be good.
Love it. But you know what? That's just part of life. We're learning some stuff along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that we're doing something new, having mistakes in front of the crowd, talking about our feelings. We're going to get pushed back on some of this. It'll give us a chance to clarify. We'll grow, we'll learn, we'll ask better questions. But that's the reason we're doing Let's Process That podcast.
That's right. Which leads me to make sure that you are liking, subscribing, leaving us a review about how just fantastic it is and how much you're learning and growing. We just would love that. Make sure you follow us. You can follow me on Instagram at Emily B. Christopher and on Facebook, Emily Christopher. Nick, where can people follow you?
They can follow me on Facebook, Nick Honorkamp. They can follow me on Instagram, Nick Honorkamp.
There we go. And we also have our own Instagram. Make sure you are also following that. It is at Let's Process That Podcast. And we will see you next time. Like I said, make sure you like, subscribe, do all the things. And yeah, we'll see you on the next one. Bye, guys.
Be kind, y'all.